It was supposed to be an ordinary Saturday. April 14, 2012, the small town of Crestwood, Oregon, was waking up to a cloudy morning. Coffee brewed in sleepy kitchens. Kids were tugging on sneakers for soccer practice. But at the Mitchell household, panic was already setting in. Melissa Mitchell, just 19 years old at the time, was gone. Before we dive in, this story is one of the most bizarre and chilling cases of deception you'll ever hear. A girl vanishes without a trace, only to be living a lie in plain sight. If you're into shocking true crime stories that twist at every turn, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what we uncover. Now let's go back to the day she disappeared. Her bedroom window was wide open. Her bed still made. Her phone lay untouched on the nightstand, alongside a half-drunk glass of water. No note. No signs of struggle. Just gone. Her mother, Carol, was hysterical. She wouldn't run away, she kept repeating to officers. She just got into college. She had plans. Melissa had been the golden girl of Crestwood, head of the student council, part-time library clerk, known for her bright smile and journal full of poetry. She wasn't the type to vanish without a trace. So when police ruled out immediate danger and labeled her a possible runaway, the town erupted in outrage. Posters went up. Candlelight vigils were held. Her classmates wore her favorite color, blue, in solidarity. Local news stations ran her photo every night at 6 p.m. Her name was everywhere. And then, nothing. No sightings. No tips. No answers. The days turned into weeks, the weeks into months. Eventually the Mitchell home grew quiet. Carol stopped answering reporters. The blue ribbons faded in the sun. People moved on, but not completely. Because in a town like Crestwood, people don't just disappear. And certainly not girls like Melissa. What nobody knew, not her mother, not her friends, not even the officers combing nearby forests, was that Melissa Mitchell was still alive. And she was closer than anyone imagined. It had been exactly 2 years since 17-year-old Kayla Monroe disappeared from her small hometown of Ashford, Oregon. Her face was still pinned to bulletin boards at gas stations and grocery stores, her name whispered during neighborhood conversations and community vigils. But Kayla? She was no longer Kayla. She was now living 1,200 miles away under a different name, Emily Carson, and no one had a clue. After carefully orchestrating her own disappearance, Kayla used a fake ID she bought online to board a bus out of state. She dyed her blonde hair jet black, adopted a subtle southern accent, and buried every piece of her former life. Her first stop was Denver, Colorado, where she lived in a women's shelter for a few months before finding under-the-table work at a small diner. To the outside world, she was just another troubled teen who'd aged out of the foster system. Quiet, polite, and never one to ask questions. She went unnoticed. And that's exactly how she wanted it. But behind that calm exterior, Kayla had transformed herself into a master manipulator. She knew how to blend in, how to gain trust, and most importantly, how to lie, convincingly. By the time she turned 20, she had built a life with a fake history, a new group of friends, and even a boyfriend named Logan, who had no idea who she really was. She told him she was orphaned, that her records were lost in a fire, and that's why she had no past. He believed her. Everyone did. Back home, her parents, Mark and Diane Monroe, were living a never-ending nightmare. Her mother clung to hope, organizing search parties, calling psychics, and appearing on daytime talk shows to keep her daughter's name alive. Her father, once a pillar in the community, became withdrawn, suspicious of everyone, and borderline paranoid. But nothing prepared them for what would happen next. One evening, Kayla, or rather Emily, posted a blurry photo of herself at a concert on social media. She was confident that her disguise, her hair, her new persona were enough to shield her. But someone from her old life was scrolling that night. It was Jessica Palmer, a former classmate who had grown up with Kayla and had spent years mourning her disappearance. Something about the girl in that photo, the way she smiled, the scar near her right eyebrow, the shape of her eyes, it all screamed Kayla. Jessica didn't hesitate. She took a screenshot and sent it to Kayla's mother. Within 48 hours, the Monroe family was on the phone with private investigators, and soon the authorities were involved. But would Kayla admit the truth? And what exactly had she been hiding all these years? When the knock came at her apartment door, Emily wasn't expecting visitors. It was late afternoon and she had just gotten home from her shift at the bakery. She peeked through the peephole and saw two unfamiliar men in plain clothes. "Miss Carson?" one asked as she cracked the door. She nodded, her heart already racing. "We'd like to ask you a few questions," the taller one said, flashing a badge. "Mind if we come in?" She didn't protest, not outwardly. But inside, panic began to churn. She had run scenarios in her head 100 times over. This wasn't one of them. They sat across from her on the worn couch, flipping through a folder. Her photo, the real one, was paper-clipped to a missing persons flyer. "Do you recognize this girl?" one of the officers asked. Kayla swallowed hard. She stared at the photo. "No," she said, voice steady. "Are you sure? Because this was you. Your name is Kayla Monroe and you've been missing for almost 5 years." Silence hung in the air like a fog. She could feel her carefully constructed world beginning to unravel. But she wasn't ready to give up. "I think you have the wrong person." That was her final attempt. But the blood drained from her face when the second officer pulled out a side-by-side comparison of the concert photo and a school yearbook picture. Same scar. Same eyes. Same smile. It was over. Within days the news broke. Missing teen found living under alias after faking kidnapping. The internet exploded. Reporters camped outside her old home. Her parents, now older and visibly weary, made statements. Confusion and grief etched deep into their faces. But the bigger question everyone wanted to know wasn't just why Kayla had run away, but how she managed to deceive so many people for so long. And even more disturbing, was there more to her disappearance than just a teenage rebellion? Because behind closed doors, Kayla's story took an even darker turn, one no one had seen coming. In the public eye, Kayla Monroe had been a bright, bubbly teenager. Honor roll student. Choir member. Beloved by her teachers and friends. Her disappearance had shattered her small-town community, sparking candlelight vigils, search parties, and endless online theories. But behind the perfectly filtered version of her life was a truth that no one had dared to consider. After being taken into custody and facing mounting pressure from both police and media, Kayla finally agreed to talk. Her voice was calm, flat, even, but what she revealed chilled investigators. She hadn't been kidnapped. She had run. Not for attention. Not out of rebellion. But for survival. According to Kayla, her home life had been a prison. She spoke of emotional manipulation, coercive control, and a secret she had carried since she was 12. Her stepfather, a man the town respected as a high school basketball coach, had been abusing her for years, mentally, emotionally, and worse. And her mother? She had known. Or at the very least, had chosen to look away. "I couldn't breathe in that house," Kayla confessed during the interview. "Everyone thought I had this perfect life. But every day I was dying a little more." So she'd planned her disappearance. For nearly a year she'd studied survival forums, watched videos on faking identities, and built a strategy for how to vanish without a trace. The night she left, she made it look like a kidnapping, knocking over a chair, leaving the front door open, even dragging a few strands of hair across a broken picture frame. It had worked. She hitchhiked for 2 days, changed her name in a nearby town, and eventually landed a job where no one asked questions. But now, exposed and vulnerable, Kayla was left with a different kind of fear. Not just of being punished, but of not being believed. The police opened an investigation into her stepfather. When questioned, he denied everything. Her mother refused to speak to the press. But the community? They were divided. Some hailed Kayla as brave, a survivor who took control of her own fate. Others called her a manipulator, a liar who wasted public resources and destroyed reputations. Yet beneath all the noise, one truth echoed louder than the rest. Kayla hadn't vanished to deceive the world. She'd vanished because it was the only way she thought she could survive it. But the real question still remained, would justice finally be served, or would Kayla be forced to pay the price for saving her own life? The courtroom was packed. Journalists lined the benches. Old neighbors craned their necks for a glimpse. And at the center of it all sat Kayla Monroe, no longer the missing girl from the flyers, but a young woman carrying the weight of 1,000 opinions. The trial wasn't about Kayla. Not at first. It was about her stepfather, Rick Monroe, the man she had accused of years of unspeakable abuse. He took the stand with practiced ease. Clean-shaven. Respectably dressed. He spoke of his troubled stepdaughter, how she was always seeking attention, and how her accusations were nothing more than a desperate attempt to cover her lies. But then came the evidence. A journal Kayla had hidden in the attic before she fled, filled with entries no teenager should ever have to write. Medical records showing injuries that had once been dismissed as accidents. A neighbor who, for the first time, admitted she'd heard crying at odd hours, but never said anything. The most damning testimony came from Kayla herself. She sat before a silent courtroom and recounted everything. The fear, the silence, the moment she realized no one was coming to save her. "I didn't fake my kidnapping to hurt anyone," she said, voice shaking. "I faked it because no one would believe me otherwise." And in that moment, the courtroom shifted. The story wasn't about a runaway anymore. It was about a girl trapped in plain sight, screaming for help behind a perfect smile. The jury took only 2 hours to return a verdict. Guilty. Rick Monroe was sentenced to 22 years in prison. But Kayla's trial wasn't over. The state pressed charges for obstruction, fraud, and misuse of public resources related to her staged disappearance. The public was split. Some called it justice, others demanded leniency. In the end, the court recognized her trauma. Kayla received a suspended sentence, mandatory counseling, and was ordered to publicly apologize for the false kidnapping. She did so in a televised statement that left millions in tears. "I'm sorry I lied," she said. "But I'm not sorry I survived." Kayla's story became a national conversation. About abuse. About survival. About how the truth can look a lot like deception, when no one wants to see it. But her fight wasn't over. After the verdict, the media frenzy died down. But for Kayla Monroe, the real battle was just beginning. She tried to go back to normal, but what did that even mean anymore? Her face had been on national television. Her story dissected in podcasts, crime blogs, and late-night talk shows. Some called her a survivor. Others called her a manipulator. In every grocery store line and gas station window, there were whispers. Is that the girl who faked her kidnapping? Even in the small town where she once disappeared, people weren't sure how to treat her. Parents crossed the street with their children. Old friends stopped answering her messages. The local church quietly revoked her invitation to speak. Kayla started therapy, slowly unpacking years of abuse and the trauma of hiding in plain sight. But healing doesn't follow a schedule. Some nights she couldn't sleep, replaying every lie she had to tell to stay safe. Other days she second-guessed everything. Had she done the right thing? Or had she become the villain in her own rescue story? Meanwhile, her mother, once silent and complicit, had begun speaking out. In a tearful interview, she admitted the warning signs were there, but she had been too afraid to face them. Her guilt was heavy, but so was the burden of public shame. In a quiet turn of events, Kayla moved to a different state, changed her name, and tried to start over. She found part-time work at a women's shelter, helping victims of domestic violence. In many ways, she had become what she never had: a protector, a voice, a believer. But the internet never forgets. Every few months, her story resurfaced. A documentary, a podcast episode, a Reddit thread titled, "Whatever Happened to the Girl Who Faked Her Own Kidnapping?" Each time she held her breath, hoping people would read past the headline. Now in her late 20s, Kayla lives quietly. No spotlight, no stage. But she's still haunted by a simple question. Would anyone have believed me if I hadn't disappeared? The case of Kayla Monroe didn't just capture headlines, it sparked a national conversation. If someone could fake their own kidnapping and hide for years, what does that say about the systems meant to protect victims? After the dust settled, investigative journalists began digging deeper. What they found was shocking. There were other cases, eerily similar. Women and children who vanished, only to be found years later, often living under aliases, often running from something far more dangerous than being caught. A system that failed them. One report uncovered a pattern. Victims who had tried to get help but were dismissed, doubted, or denied. Police reports that went nowhere. Restraining orders that were never enforced. Therapy appointments never followed up. And sometimes, abusers who were in law enforcement, legal professions, or high-profile jobs, making them nearly untouchable. Kayla's story became a symbol, not just of deception but of desperation. Her choice, to disappear, may have been extreme. But for some, it was the only way out. Advocacy groups picked up her case, demanding reforms. Better training for law enforcement to spot covert abuse. More support for victims whose abusers use manipulation, not just violence. A call for society to believe survivors, even when their stories sound unbelievable. Kayla, though silent publicly, continued her work quietly. Through anonymous letters, donations, and private support networks, she began to help others escape, without vanishing. But the deeper question remains. How many are still hiding? How many fake a smile every day, while silently planning their escape? And how many will we only hear about after it's too late? Because in a world obsessed with villains and heroes, Kayla Monroe's story proved something terrifying. Sometimes the truth lives in the gray. And sometimes the missing don't want to be found, until they're sure it's finally safe. If this story gave you chills, you're not alone. Cases like Kayla's reveal just how complex the truth can be, and how easily it can be buried beneath fear, pain, and silence. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. There's always more hiding beneath the surface, and we'll be here to uncover it. Until next time, stay safe, and stay curious.